Hello and welcome to Unacademy IAS English, a one-stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. A very good morning and welcome to the daily Hindu news analysis. Before we start the discussion, let me wish everyone a very happy Holi. So before we start the discussion, let's take a look at the topics that we are going to discuss. From the Delhi edition of the Hindu, I have chosen 10 important articles for a detailed and comprehensive analysis so that you don't have to go back and read the newspaper again. If you guys are liking this initiative, benefiting from our Hindu analysis, do support us with your likes and comments, and don't forget to share this video with other aspirants. Now, before I start, I have a very important announcement. As part of Conquer Prelims under stage 3 of this program, tomorrow I'll be taking up a marathon session on PYQ discussion based on questions from international relations that have appeared in previous question papers. This session will be live tomorrow, that is Saturday at 7 p.m. So do ensure you catch the session live, especially those who are preparing for 2025 prelims and even those who are starting for 2026. These sessions will give you a good idea regarding what kind of questions have been asked by UPSC over the last 10 to 11 years. Then those of you who want the PDF of today's class, please join my Telegram channel by scanning the QR code. I'll be sharing the PDF after the session ends. So let's get started and look at the first article. We have a very interesting and important column on page number 8 that is related to the significance of the English language. See, of late, India has been consumed by language wars. In fact, even we have done 2 podcasts on this sensitive topic, and this has led to a war of words between the central government and several state governments, such as the government of Tamil Nadu. It has triggered an intense debate and a controversial debate amongst Indians, leading to even divisions between north of India and south of India. So I will not waste your time by talking about the same topics and issues again. I'll be taking up only this article today because see, today we had one more article as well related to the 3-language formula. But we have already discussed that enough number of times, so I would not like to waste your time again. So let's look at this article, which gives us a very different and unique perspective, because it is focused on the relevance of the English language and how politics and linguistic regionalism and linguistic parochialism, how it could be killing the relevance of English, which is very critical for India's economic growth and economic rise. So that is the focus of the article. How the politics of language in India, the allegations of Hindi imposition, the pushback against Hindi imposition by the non-Hindi speaking states, and the linguistic parochialism that you get to see in India. So this ends up harming India's economic prospects. This could even end up leaving behind a large section of the Indian youth who might be deprived of access to the English language as a result of the politics, the conflict of sorts that you're seeing with regard to language and linguistic identity. So let's go a little deeper into this article. Let's understand what exactly is the author arguing. Of course, we'll go beyond the article as well. We'll look at different related arguments to understand why it is important for India to focus on English, especially to power the rise and growth of the nation. See, some of you may not agree with this assessment. Many of you might point out that English is a British Western language. It represents a colonial hangover which we haven't gotten rid of. Some of you might say, how can we focus and prioritize on English at the cost of our native languages? See, please understand, when it comes to language, it's a very sensitive, emotive subject. Everybody, any individual in any part of the world is closely linked with their language, their mother tongue. There is a strong sense of cultural identity, even a sense of regional identity that one associates with their particular language. So be it Hindi, be it Tamil, be it Assamese, Kannada, Marathi, any language for that matter. It does form a very core aspect of your identity, of your existence. Now, nobody is asking you to compromise your cultural identity, your linguistic identity for the sake of English. The argument here is that English today is more of a utilitarian language. You don't even have to look at English as some sort of Western imposition, because today things have changed. Today, English has become a pragmatic necessity in order to integrate into the global mainstream. And this is not just being seen in India, but around the world. Whether you agree with this or not, the established fact is that in critical domains such as the STEM domain, in the domains of science, technology, engineering, mathematics, these are the domains which are critical to power the rise and growth of a nation. If India aspires to become a developed nation by 2047, we will have to lead the world in many key technologies, from artificial intelligence to cybersecurity to quantum computing. You will not become a leader in these technologies without relying on the English language. Now, I know many of you will have a counter argument for this as well. The popular counter argument is that, sir, haven't other Asian countries developed? Haven't they pioneered technologies without really focusing on English? This is the common argument that you get to hear. You get to hear examples of China or South Korea or even Japan, and they point out how these Asian countries have pioneered technology. They have been able to develop their economies even without depending on English. Now, please let me tell you, this is largely a myth. It's a misconception that other Asian countries have grown and developed without relying on English. Let me break the myth for you today, because if you look at China's rise in the 1970s and 80s in China, when China first opened up its economy, started moving towards a manufacturing-based economy. Yes, in that era, in the 70s and 80s, China was not focused much upon English. Chinese Mandarin was the prevalent language. But very quickly, China realized by 1990s that without promoting English amongst its workforce, China will not be able to dominate the global supply chains. Now, for example, today China is pioneering a global project, the Belt and Road Initiative, where China is looking to invest and develop strategic and critical infrastructure projects around the world to link China with the economies of other countries. Now, you tell me, how can such a global project thrive and flourish if Chinese diplomats, Chinese workers, technicians, engineers, if they can't converse in a common tongue? They can't expect to go to, let's say, Brazil or Peru or some Pacific island or African nation and expect people there to speak the Chinese language. So China was very smart in this regard. So please get rid of this misconception that Asian countries have not really relied on English. It's a myth. China has promoted English. Look at its national entrance exam at the college level, the Gokao. It's like the equivalent of your JEE NEET exam. One of the biggest examinations in the world, toughest exams as well, where millions of Chinese students attempt this exam annually to proceed towards college education. Did you know in this entrance examination, English is a mandatory subject, having the same amount of marks as the Chinese Mandarin language? It is on par with even mathematics with regard to marks allocation in the examination. Today, China is churning out millions and millions of English speakers, not only in the cities and urban areas, but even in the rural pockets of China. That is one reason why China managed to rise in the manufacturing domain, in research and development. So this doesn't mean China has lost its identity. It doesn't mean China has lost its link with its native language. While promoting the native language, China has equally promoted English. If you look at China's state broadcasters, they actually give a lot of preference for English-based communication. Chinese diplomats from more than 40 years have been pushed towards learning English and use English as a common tongue, especially when they are working abroad. Chinese engineers, technicians, they all receive priority in their companies. Chinese companies like Huawei, they have a mandatory English language course where every worker who's hired by the company has to learn English, which ensures that China can leverage its proficiency, use it like a soft power tool to gain the economic advantages. So China has not lost its cultural identity. It has not come under Western imposition, or it's not being affected by the colonial hangover. They are looking at this as a utilitarian tool, as a pragmatic approach, because today, in most of the streams of higher education, English is the preferred medium of instruction, even in India. Most of the material would be available in the English language. You look at information technology, computer science, telecommunication, even, let's say, the legal profession, in the domain of commerce, with regard to MBAs, or even advanced courses as well, PG and doctorate courses, be it in AI, be it in big data, be it in quantum research, around the world, most of the education which is provided is largely in the English medium. Now you might say China might be one exception, but that's not true as well. That's why I'm telling you, break the myth, break this misconception. Look at Israel. Israel, which largely speaks Hebrew, has widely adopted English so that it could integrate into the global mainstream, especially in science and tech domain. And today, Israeli researchers, students, they fluently converse in English for utilitarian, practical, economic reasons, while preserving their cultural identity. And there are many more examples I can give you. Look at South Korea. If you look at South Korea's examination system, the Sunwang, students again are expected mandatorily to learn English and to show English proficiency. Now, if you compare this with India, let's say we compare it with UPSC Civil Services exam. I'm sure all of you remember when English comprehension was introduced in CSAT, it led to large protests, especially in northern parts of India. That how can you introduce this as a qualification, and how this could lead to discrimination against candidates from rural background. But you tell me, is it possible in today's world to have future bureaucrats, diplomats, police officers who can't fluently converse in English? Recently, a video has gone viral where a judge has taken an IAS officer to task because an IAS officer was not able to converse in basic English. So this is the point the writer is trying to highlight. South Korea also made a big shift. In the last 30 years, South Korea has made a big shift towards English. Doesn't mean they have lost out on their native language. They promote their native language, they cherish their linguistic identity, they protect their cultural identity, but they learn English as well, primarily for utilitarian, practical purposes, for economic reasons. I'm sure you would have heard about South Korean companies like Samsung, Hyundai. These companies have made it mandatory for their workers to learn English. They provide courses as well to the fresh recruits. I'm sure all of you are familiar with the soft power of Korea attached with Korean food or K-pop, K-drama. Today you have Korean bands, Korean artists who deliberately release English songs and English tracks as well, just to gain the economic advantage from the Western audience. Doesn't mean they have compromised their cultural identity. So this is how South Korea also has adapted, and it has leveraged the power of English as a global medium of communication to promote science, technology, engineering, mathematics, to integrate with the global mainstream and to take forward Korea's image around the world. That's what Chinese diplomats, Chinese engineers, Chinese bankers are doing under the Belt and Road Initiative. Even Vietnam, which until recently had shut itself off with regard to Western influence and English, has opened up, and it has launched a dedicated project, the National Foreign Language Project, under which English has been prioritized, mainly because Vietnam is exploding as a tech hub, a startup hub. You can't really promote tech-based industries, manufacturing industries, without focusing on English just for the sake of learning that is education, educational outcomes, and economic prosperity. Even in India, this is true. Today, if you are not proficient in the English language, you won't be able to land a good job, a high-paying job. This is a necessity. Let me know what you think in the comments. Can you do without the English language today in today's world? See, we have every right to be proud about our language, be it Hindi, be it Kannada, be it Malayalam, any language. Yes, we need to learn those languages. We need to cherish our identity. But purely for utilitarian reasons, just for the sake of securing good jobs, integrating with the global mainstream, and ensuring that we have access to good higher education, ensuring that we land good aspirational jobs, English is a practical requirement. Now, it is this distinction that we Indians have to create. The Chinese have done it, the Koreans have done it, the Vietnamese have done it, Israelis have done it. So India today is being taken backward by our political parties and politicians, both at the center and at the state level. In Maharashtra, for example, you might have read recently how the government is trying to push Marathi as a compulsory mandatory language in government transaction. While it is good for preserving the linguistic identity, this could compromise the use of English as an official language. And don't forget, the more we get divided with this politics of language by our politicians and political parties, India as a country will not only suffer economically, we will suffer socially as well. How? Because there is a big divide when it comes to access to English language. According to data, around 10% of our workforce has access to English medium courses. They are fluent in English, which means a very small percentage of our workforce is able to land the aspirational jobs, the high-paying, high-skilled jobs. And most of these English speakers in our country, they come from the urban pockets, cities and towns in our country, where private schools, private colleges are providing them English medium-based education. But what about our rural youth? Because of language politics being played by the central government, by certain state governments and various political parties, our rural youth are losing out. Most of those who attend government schools in particular, they're not having enough access to English medium-based education. In states where three-language formula, or let's say 2 languages have been implemented, especially in the Hindi-speaking belt, English has in some cases been made optional, or it is not even offered at the school and college level, pushing several youth in our country to focus on their native language, and this creates a discrepancy. It leaves them behind, leading to a divide, which in a way is a violation of the constitutional right of equality, ensuring equity in the society. Where one section has access to English-based education, they will thrive, they'll get better jobs, they will prosper, they will rise up the social and economic ladder, leaving behind a large percentage of our population. It is this concern that the writer is correctly flagging. See, tomorrow, India will account for 23% of the global workforce by 2050. Now, can such a large workforce afford to not speak English or not be able to speak fluently in English? English proficiency has become a necessity primarily for economic reasons, utilitarian reasons. You need not get attached to it. Doesn't mean you're getting influenced by Western culture. Doesn't mean that you are still a slave of the colonial powers. No. You are simply learning English as a utilitarian tool to get the good education, right education, land the right job, and prosper in life. And with your prosperity, the country will prosper. Whereas you continue to focus on your mother tongue, your native languages. Nobody is stopping you from doing that. So this is the essential argument that the writer is bringing out, which I think is very essential, because today the kind of divide which has been promoted by governments and political parties, this is purely vote bank politics by every side, be it the party at the center, party at the state level, right? Every other political party which is raising this issue, they are purely playing vote bank politics. Divisive politics is good for them. So it's high time for India to move beyond this and adopt English primarily for utilitarian, economic, practical reasons while protecting our our regional linguistic diversity and culture. So that is the essential argument here. So please take up a practice question. Linguistic policies risk undermining India's global and technological ambitions. Analyze. So based on what we have discussed, use those points, use the structure that I followed to write a good answer, and please post your answers in the comment section. Now let's look at another interesting article on India's power sector. This article is actually very detailed, gives a lot of data and insights regarding the power sector in our country. See, the power demand in India has been increasing very significantly in recent years. Data shows that in the last few years, the demand for power, demand for electricity is increasing at a rate of 9% per annum. So year on year, our demand for electricity is jumping by 9%, which means we need more power production to match the demand. To match the increasing demand for electricity, we need to increase and step up power production. Now the question is, where will the extra power come from? What will be the approach that India adopts to match the demand for power? And what is leading to the rising demand for power and electricity? What are the causes that are contributing to the increasing demand for electricity? Because the increase that we have seen in last, let's say 3-4 years at a rate of 9% every year is significantly higher than what was estimated, what was projected. The Central Electricity Authority had projected that India's power demand will grow by just 6% between 2022 and 2030. But this projection has been proven to be wrong, because the actual jump in demand for power is at 9% every year, not 6% as it was estimated by the Central Electricity Authority, which means something has gone wrong. Somewhere something has gone wrong, which has led to a sudden jump and increase in the demand for power. Now, if you try to identify who are the consumers of power, first, of course, would be your industries. Industries are obviously power guzzling industries, manufacturing industries, MSME sector, even services based industries. Of course, they need power. It's an absolute essential to drive economic activity. Then households, at all our homes, we consume a lot of electricity to run our appliances on a day-to-day basis. Then agriculture is another key sector. Farmers depend on power supply to run water pumps for irrigation, and for other activities, especially mechanized farming, will require power supply. So there is an increasing demand because of India's economic growth and economic rise. So as India expands economically, our industrial activity will go up. Demand for household electricity will also increase. Demand for power from the agrarian rural sector will also increase. So this definitely has contributed to an increase in demand for power. But this still does not explain the abnormal jump in the demand for power. The Central Electricity Authority, after considering all the projections, had estimated that power demand will increase by only 6% from 2022 to 2030. But suddenly we are seeing a jump in power demand at a rate of 9% every year. Where is this additional jump coming from? This is largely due to climate change linked stress, heat stress, which has become a pressing issue not just in our country but around the world. The rising temperatures has increased the need for cooling solutions. See, each summer in the last 3-4 years has been witnessing record temperatures. Year on year, we are recording the highest temperatures recorded, which means the heat stress is increasing the demand for cooling solutions. Don't we run fans and air conditioners and coolers much more than we used to before. Let's say we go back 15, 20 years. Right? Just think to what extent we were using fans or air conditioners or coolers or even refrigerators for that matter at our homes. Today, this has jumped significantly. And also don't forget, the spending power of Indians also has gone up. As India has grown, lifted millions out of poverty, people today have disposable income to afford to buy a refrigerator, to buy air conditioners, to invest in more fans, to pay the higher electricity bill, just to ensure they can cool down because of the tremendous heat which is being recorded. Similarly, in the industry as well, there is a massive jump in demand for cooling solutions. You take food processing industry, for example, restaurant industry, for example. The demand for cold storage goes up significantly because of rising temperatures. So climate change linked heat stress is what has led to a significant surge in demand for electricity, especially in the summer months. Along with that, India's economic rise, increasing industrial activities, household consumption and agrarian consumption is also definitely contributing to rising power demand. Now, where is the power coming from with regard to India? What is the share from different sectors? Let's understand this. See, traditionally, India has relied heavily on thermal power produced primarily through coal, which is a fossil fuel. Until recently, almost 60% of our electricity was produced through thermal power plants powered by coal. But today, we have reduced it to less than 50%. The share of thermal power has gone down in the last 10 to 15 years from around 58 to 60% to around 49 to 48%. So the share of coal-based power production today in our country has come down just below 50%. So if thermal power-based production has gone down, obviously we should have increased power production in some other sector. This is nothing but renewable energy. Our investments in clean renewable energy has gone up, and today renewable energy sector accounts for around 13.5% of the total electricity that we are producing in our country. This is the rough share in our energy basket. This shift towards clean renewable energy has been driven by our climate commitments, because fossil fuel such as coal is polluting, contributes to air pollution, plus it contributes to greenhouse gas emissions, which leads to global warming and climate change. So as part of the Paris Agreement and the voluntary commitments that India has made under the INDCs or intended nationally determined contributions, India has set a very ambitious target for itself to have an installed capacity of 500 gigawatts by 2030 with regard to renewable sources of energy. The initial target we had announced was much less, but the Modi government, which has been very confident that we'll achieve this goal, has almost doubled the target, and today the set target for India is to have an installed renewable energy capacity of 500 gigawatts by 2030. See, as of today, India is the third largest producer of electricity in the world. We are the third largest electricity producing nation, producing around 460 gigawatts of power. Total, if you take all the sources combined, nuclear, clean renewable energy, coal, thermal based plants, geothermal energy, everything, if you take everything cumulatively into account, as the third largest electricity producer today, we are approximately producing around 460 gigawatts of energy. Now, the goal in another few years is to ensure we will produce 500 gigawatts just from renewable sources. That excludes nuclear, thermal power and other sources. Just from clean renewable energy, we will be producing up to 500 gigawatts. Now, the point is, can India achieve this? Is it a realistic target? Where do we stand today? And how do we meet or match the rising demand for power? Because in the coming years, in the coming decades, the demand for power is only going to increase further because of climate change linked heat stress. Demand for ACs, coolers, fans, refrigerators will keep on increasing. And it essentially means that the government will have to ensure that the demand is met with adequate supplies. So to understand this, first we need to look at the share of power consumption by our industries, households, and agriculture. This factual data can be relevant for your prelims as well. Right now, around 33% of the electricity produced is consumed by our industries. So industries account for one of the highest consumption, followed by households at 28%, agriculture at 19%, with other miscellaneous consumers. Now, the share of all these consumers is only going to increase. For example, household power consumption, as I told you, has gone up significantly because today millions of families can afford fans, refrigerators, air conditioners, and coolers. So how will India match this? How can we increase our production? What should be our plan? That is what we need to know. Now, 2024 was the best year for India with regard to installation of renewable sources of energy. Last year, we have installed around 28 gigawatts of capacity in the clean renewable sector, primarily from solar energy and wind energy. Also includes hydropower as well. So 28 gigawatts of installed capacity was achieved by India last year, 2024, which was the best year for India with regard to installation of renewable projects. Now, at this rate, we will never meet the target. If, let's say, on an average, every year we are adding, let's say, 30 gigawatts of installed capacity of renewable energy, we will never meet the 500 gigawatt target. And the writers are saying that even 500 gigawatts of renewable energy is not going to be sufficient to match the increased demand for power. We need to aim for 600 gigawatts of renewable energy with significant reduction in thermal power. Maybe thermal power as a share of the energy basket should come down to around 10 to 15%, and most of the power should be met through renewable sources. And the writers are urging the government to increase the target to 600 gigawatts. So at this rate, it basically means India will have to install around 70 gigawatts of renewable energy capacity every year. So is it feasible? Is it practically possible for India? Because right now, we are able to install only 28 gigawatts of renewable energy sources. That was the best performance for us last year. Now, can we double this? More than double, in fact. The answer is yes, we can do it, but it requires the right policies, the right support. As of now, only few states have pioneered in clean renewable energy. You take Tamil Nadu, for example, Maharashtra, Gujarat to an extent. Some states have taken a lead, whereas other states have often fallen behind. So that's why the writers are urging the central government to work with the state governments to come out with right policies, make it easy to procure the land that is required. Because if you concentrate solar and wind projects only in few states, that will increase the stress on those states. Because energy projects require large-scale land acquisition as well. It puts a stress on the resources. It puts a stress on the local community. Such projects will face strong opposition as well if you concentrate these projects only in few states and leave behind other states. So the writers are urging the government to spread out the clean renewable energy projects across Indian states, from Northeast India to Southern India to Western India, because there is sufficient potential available in our country. We just need to explore that potential and incentivize and promote the installation of renewable energy projects. And the regulations that right now govern the clean renewable sector have to be simplified. Quick clearances have to be provided without compromising the environmental concerns and the need for sustainability. So this requires better policy making from the center and the states to ensure that we can match this target, because or else we will fall short and we will never be able to match the rising demand, creating a huge deficit. And this again will affect the poor people, the remote areas. The vulnerable sections will get left behind because the rich and the dominant classes will always have access and affordability, whereas the weaker sections will get left out. So that is a divide we have to avoid when it comes to the energy sector. So I think that's where this article is very important. So please take up this practice question. Besides economic growth and urbanization, climate change induced heat stress is one of the key factors driving electricity demand. In this scenario, how can India meet its rising demand for power? Discuss. Let's look at another interesting article, a column on page number 8 that focuses on gender budgeting. Let's have a quick discussion on this before we move on to the next article. So what is gender budgeting? In the annual budget which is presented, the union budget, if the government makes special allocation on the lines of gender to ensure the welfare of women, to ensure dedicated funding for welfare-oriented schemes for women, and to empower women with regard to their education, their health, their livelihood, etc. If dedicated budgetary allocation is made, that type of budgetary allocation is referred to as gender budgeting. You're budgeting on the lines of gender in order to uplift women who are vulnerable, because in patriarchal societies, due to historical discrimination as well against women, women are often downtrodden, and especially if women belong to other weaker classes such as scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, they are at an added disadvantage. They face multiple vulnerabilities. So to uplift women, to provide them better education, better access to healthcare, give them livelihood opportunities, to make them more independent, and overall empower women, governments often resort to this practice where in the budget itself, in the budgetary allocations which are made for different ministries, for different government schemes and welfare programs, special allocations are made on the lines of gender so that women receive a higher priority. With more funds available, definitely women will become a higher priority for governance, and this will lead to significant improvements in the outcomes as far as women empowerment is concerned. Now, if you look at the budgetary allocation in India, in the recent union budget that was presented by Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman, there has been a significant jump in gender budgeting, which is very good, very positive. In fact, the writers, the article praises the Modi government because in the last 4 years, in the last 4 budgets, gender-based budgeting has more than doubled. If you look at, let's say 3-4 years ago, the allocation that was made was roughly around 1.2 lakh crores for gender budgeting. Today, it has hit 4.49 lakh crores. Compared to last year's budgetary allocation, this is a 37.25% increase in gender budgeting. So this increase in gender-based budgeting is a very positive, welcome move by the government. The government deserves the credit and the praise for focusing on women empowerment, for increasing the availability of funds for various welfare programs, ministries, and key government departments, so that they have dedicated funds available to focus on women welfare and women empowerment. I think this data itself is very significant. Just look at the article here. The current budgetary allocation with regard to gender budgeting is at 4.49 lakh crores, and this is a 37% increase compared to last year. Compared to 4 years ago, this is more than doubling of the gender budgeting. As I told you, 4 years ago, gender budgeting was just around 1 lakh crores, and now it has jumped to 4.49 lakh crores. So this significant jump in allocation brings more fiscal resources at the disposal of the government, which paves the path for women welfare. But the question is, has increased financial allocation brought true improvement for women? Has it led to outcomes which are measurable? And the answer is actually no. Even though the budgetary allocation has gone up with regard to gender budgeting, the implementation, the monitoring of the schemes and programs is missing. And in fact, many ministries and departments, they don't even spend the entire budget which is given to them specifically for women welfare. And this is essentially compromising our focus on women empowerment. As I told you, women suffer from multiple vulnerabilities. They not only face gender-based discrimination right from birth to death in a patriarchal orthodox society, but they also face many other challenges and vulnerabilities, especially if they belong to other weaker classes. Imagine a widowed woman, or a Divyang woman, or a woman who belongs to SC/ST community. So along with gender-based discrimination, they'll end up facing many other types of discrimination as well. Social caste-based discrimination or income-based discrimination. So women from SC/ST community are even more vulnerable, which means they deserve greater attention. So gender budgeting ideally should target them. The welfare schemes and programs should uplift them as they are the targeted beneficiaries for such programs. But unfortunately, despite higher budgetary allocation, this is not translating into outcomes. Now, for example, the Modi government championed a very good initiative, PM Jan Man initiative, focused on tribal welfare, focused on the Janjatis, to promote tribal welfare in the country, particularly the PVTGs, the particularly vulnerable tribal groups. They were the focus of PM Jan Man. Special allocations were made, initiatives and schemes were launched under this initiative to bring about tribal development and welfare. So within the program, there would be a special allocation for women belonging to tribal communities, especially belonging to PVTG groups. But data shows that women from tribal communities have not really seen the desired outcomes. And that shows the failure of implementation of the schemes and programs. Studies have shown that in case of several government schemes, the ministries and departments are left with the money which has been allocated. They have not even spent that money which was supposed to be spent on women welfare and women empowerment. So why is this happening? What is the shortcoming in the implementation? Are we monitoring the schemes sufficiently? That is the big question which comes up. Because the government has done the right thing by providing higher budgetary allocation and by providing dedicated budgetary allocation through gender budgeting. But why isn't this translating into actual results on the ground? Why are many welfare programs not having the right outcomes? Why ministries and departments are not able to spend this money, even though financial resources have been allocated? They're not able to spend on the targeted beneficiaries, though they are deprived and vulnerable. This has a lot to do with the way in which the government has been implementing the schemes and programs. Now, if you look at monitoring of the programs, there is a big flaw. There is a lack of data. Without data, you can't track the progress that you are making. You take any program, for example, be it Manrega, Pradhan Mantri Matru Vandana Yojana, right? You take any scheme, Ayushman Bharat, for example. You can't track the progress, especially with regard to women beneficiaries, if you're not collecting adequate real-time data. If you're not collecting accurate data. India has not conducted a census since 2011. There has been no census post 2011. There has been a lack of data being shared or provided by the ministries and departments which are implementing critical programs. So in some cases, the government is not transparent as well with regard to implementation of government schemes. And even if the government wants to be transparent, in some cases, it doesn't have the ability to collect the right data from the grassroots level. So there is a big gap here in tracking the implementation of the programs to see how the programs are working. Are they really delivering the outcomes which are desired? So this is a big gap in governance. The overall implementation itself is a challenge here. Monitoring is a challenge. Digitization of government schemes, on the other hand, also has led to many exclusions. The introduction of direct benefit transfer, where the benefits of a government scheme, the cash benefits are directly transferred into the bank account of a beneficiary. This is good to check corruption and to prevent leakage of funds. But there is a downside to this. When you're using Aadhaar-linked bank accounts and mobile numbers to target a certain beneficiary, there could be cases where many genuine beneficiaries might get left out. Women, they may have to depend on middlemen because they may not have digital literacy, especially in the rural areas. Look at the literacy rates in our country. Female literacy is somewhere around 64%, and in rural areas, it falls below 50%. So those who lack literacy, those who don't have digital literacy and exposure, will find it difficult to access these benefits and services. They end up depending on middlemen. So many of them are deprived. Many intended beneficiaries don't get the actual benefit because they get excluded from the welfare scheme because of these governance related problems, monitoring related problems. So to ensure better implementation, we not only need better data, better monitoring, and overall better implementation at the ground level. In order to ensure this, you have to empower the local community. This has to be community driven at the grassroots level, which means your Panchayati Raj institutions, they will play a critical role. But the problem here is that women at Panchayati Raj institutions are being sidelined by the so-called Sarpanch Patis or Pradhan Patis, which is an issue we have been discussing again and again over the last few days. Even though we have constitutional reservation provided for women candidates at Panchayati Raj institutions, most states have 50% reservation. Constitution mandates 1/3 reservation. Though women candidates are fielded, they get elected as well. It's essentially their husbands or fathers or brothers who are actually running the show. So this is a major concern. The practice of Sarpanch Patis, Pradhan Patis, where they have cornered the power. They field the women of the household just to fill the reserved seats, while the men of the household take the actual decisions. This is a subversion of the constitutional provision with regard to Panchayati Raj system. So when adequate number of women are not involved in decision making at the grassroots level, obviously implementation of women-oriented schemes will suffer. So this is what needs to be tackled. It's a governance-related problem. To ensure better implementation, there has to be grassroots involvement. The local institutions, the local tier institutions have to get involved, where women will play a pivotal role in deciding the implementation of the scheme, in providing for monitoring of the program, ensuring that the targeted beneficiaries are reached out with regard to these welfare schemes. That is the only way in which gender budgeting will actually result in outcomes and will lead to women welfare and empowerment. So that is what we learn from this important article. Now let's look at another interesting editorial on page number 8. Recently, Prime Minister Modi carried out a historic visit to the Indian Ocean country of Mauritius. I'm sure all of you are aware of this. You might have read in newspapers or you might have seen on media or social media. Prime Minister Modi attended the National Day celebrations in Mauritius, which is celebrated on the 12th of March. Now, let me tell you why this visit is important. Let's break it down. Let's understand India-Mauritius relations in slight detail. The first question is, why does Mauritius celebrate its National Day on 12th of March? And every year, why does it invite dignitaries and leaders from India? Because last year, India's President Draupadi Murmu was invited. And now Prime Minister Modi has graced the National Day celebration. So what's so special about 12th of March? See, Mauritius shares a deep cultural, historical link with India. Mauritius might be located very far away from India. Let me show you the map. Look at the map here. Mauritius is very far away from India. It's an African country, an Indian Ocean country, seen as part of the East Africa region. But if you look at the relations we have with Mauritius, the kind of close trust-based ties that we have with Mauritius, it's as though Mauritius is a neighbor. Mauritius is not a neighbor of India. It's located far away in our extended neighborhood in the western part of Indian Ocean, occupying a strategic location, and it is part of the Africa region, the East Africa region essentially. In such a faraway country, India exercises tremendous historical, cultural influence. Did you know that 70% of the country's population is of Indian descent, Indian origin? Now, how is this possible? In such a faraway island country, how can 70%, more than 70% of a country's population be of Indian origin? If you go to Mauritius, you will notice many people speaking dialects of Hindi, Bhojpuri. You will find Hindu temples being present, Hindu festivals being marked and celebrated. Just look at the names of the leaders of Mauritius. The current leader, Naveen Ramagulam. The previous leader of Mauritius, Praveen Jugannath. These are clearly Hindu-sounding, Indian-sounding names. That's because majority of the country's population, 70% and more, they are of Indian origin. They are of Indian descent. This was made possible by the British. When slavery was abolished in early 1800s, African slavery was abolished with the British Parliament. The British enterprises, the colonial enterprises, they wanted cheap labor to replace African slaves. And they came out with a brutal, exploitative form of labor known as indentured labor system, under which Indians were forced or tricked or duped by the British and transported to faraway colonies from the Caribbean to the South Pacific to Africa. So that is why around the world today you find strong Indian diaspora communities. You go to the West Indies, for example. In the Caribbean region, if you go to islands like, let's say, Jamaica, St. Kitts and Nevis, you find a very strong Indian community over there. You go to South America, countries like Suriname, Guyana, they have a very strong Indian population. Even in Fiji, in South Pacific, which is so far away from India, or in Kenya for that matter, in Tanzania, South Africa, same with Mauritius. In all these former British colonies, you find a very strong Indian diaspora because of the indentured labor system, where thousands and thousands of Indian families were forcefully transported or tricked or deceived, dumped on these faraway islands and colonies in order to replace African slaves and provide cheap labor for British colonial enterprises. So the descendants of these families today form that connection with India, and they constitute the Indian diaspora in these countries, forming a close cultural bond and a link. See, that's why in 2014, when PM Modi was sworn in for the first time, and when PM Modi launched the neighborhood first policy of India, the Modi government had invited all the SAARC leaders as dignitaries to the swearing-in ceremony. This was quite unprecedented. Leaders of Bangladesh, Pakistan, Nepal, Bhutan, Sri Lanka, all of them were present at the swearing-in ceremony. Because they are neighbors of India, because the neighborhood first policy was applying primarily to our neighboring countries with whom we share land and maritime borders. But the only non-SAARC leader who was invited for the swearing-in ceremony in 2014 was the then leader of Mauritius. Though Mauritius is not a neighbor of India, geographically, I showed you the map as well. It's not a neighboring country of India. It's located far away in Western Indian Ocean as part of East Africa, closer to Madagascar. But the leader of Mauritius was invited. He was the only non-SAARC leader to be invited for the swearing-in ceremony of PM Modi in 2014 when India launched the neighborhood first policy. So what does this tell you? This was a symbolic move by India, symbolic gesture. India was sending out a message that even though Mauritius is not a neighbor of India, we treat Mauritius as though it's a neighbor of India. So that explains a lot about India's ties with Mauritius, the close cultural, historical ties that we have. In fact, this is the country where the first batch of Indian laborers were transported by the British in 1834. The first batch of Indian indentured laborers were transported to this country, Mauritius. The place where they landed at Port Louis is today a national monument. It's called the Apravasi Ghat, and it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The day on which the Indian laborers landed in Mauritius is celebrated even till date as Apravasi Day, as a tribute to the migrants who came in these boats and who were later exploited by the British enterprises. That is the close bond and link that we have. In fact, our freedom struggle is also interlinked. That is why 12th of March was specifically chosen by Mauritius to mark its National Day. In fact, when the freedom struggle in Mauritius broke out, they wanted Mahatma Gandhi to come and lead their movement, because Mahatma Gandhi had made a name for himself in South Africa as a lawyer, standing for the Indian and African community against the British oppression. Mahatma Gandhi had visited Mauritius as well. But as Gandhi decided to come to India in 1915 and give leadership to India's freedom struggle, he could not spare the time and effort to give any support for Mauritius' freedom struggle. So in his place, Mahatma Gandhi would send his close disciple, Manilal Doctor, Barrister Manilal Doctor, was dispatched by Gandhi to give leadership to the freedom struggle in Mauritius. So in many ways, the freedom movement of Mauritius was inspired by Gandhian principles, Gandhian values. And to pay tribute to Mahatma Gandhi and to India's freedom movement, Mauritius has chosen 12th March as the day to celebrate its National Day. 12th March is significant because that is the day on which Mahatma Gandhi launched Dandi March, the Salt Satyagraha. So to represent the Gandhian values, to pay tribute to the ideals of Mahatma Gandhi and, of course, by extension to India's freedom movement, and to celebrate the close cultural historical bonds we have with Mauritius, the country has chosen 12th March as its National Day. That's why usually Indian leaders are invited. I think this tells you a lot about the relations we have. So over the decades, we have shared very close ties with this small country, and we have provided a lot of funds, investments, loans. We have a strategic relationship and a major defense military presence as well, because Mauritius as a country is strategically very vital in the Indian Ocean. It lies very close to Mozambique Channel. In this map, you can clearly see the Mozambique Channel over here between Madagascar and East Africa. It is this channel that I'm talking about, the Mozambique Channel, which is a vital shipping lane. Mauritius is close to the piracy-infested waters near Horn of Africa. The rising presence of China is a deep concern for India. The Pillai Navy has significantly stepped up its naval presence in the region. And also, a part of Mauritius belonging to the Chagos group was until recently under British sovereignty, and here Britain had leased an island called Diego Garcia. It had given it on lease to the United States after the Second World War, where US has maintained a major naval base in the Indian Ocean. In fact, in the 1971 war, when then US President Richard Nixon threatened Indira Gandhi's government and dispatched the 7th Naval Fleet, USS Enterprise, towards Bay of Bengal, that naval fleet was dispatched from here, from Diego Garcia. So during the Cold War, India saw Diego Garcia and the American naval presence as a strategic threat. Today, that may not be the case, as India and US have become close partners, but the presence of external military forces, that too in significant numbers, the rising Chinese military presence, the rising security threats from piracy to terrorism, because East Africa is badly affected by terrorism and radicalism. Both Al-Qaeda, Islamic State, Al-Shabaab, they have a major presence across East Africa, which is a threat for Indian interests. So Mauritius becomes strategically very important, and we have really elevated this relationship, especially since 2015. When PM Modi visited Mauritius in 2015, he announced the launch of the Sagar Doctrine, security and growth for all in the region, promising maritime security and economic growth for all the countries. And we even inaugurated a coastal surveillance radar, which has been built by India. This was a maritime security project started by the then Manmohan Singh government after the 26/11 attacks. So we have extended the coastal surveillance radars to friendly countries like Mauritius, Seychelles, and others. And this defense project was inaugurated by PM Modi in 2015. He announced the launch of the Sagar Doctrine, and we even gained the lease of a strategic island known as the Agalega Island. So can you see this narrow strip of island here? The Agalega Island, which belongs to Mauritius. So India obtained this island on lease in 2015, and through a secret agreement, India has built transport infrastructure on this island. We have built a runway and a harbor facility. India and Mauritius say that it's a commercial project intended to help the economy of Mauritius and the people of Mauritius. But experts believe that these projects could easily have a strategic military purpose. It can easily accommodate the naval ships of India. It can accommodate the transport planes and fighter jets of Indian Air Force and the Indian Navy. So Indian military presence is constantly noted in Mauritius. We have even donated military hardware to Mauritius. We have provided the ALH Dhruv helicopters for maritime surveillance. We have donated the Dornier aircraft for maritime reconnaissance and surveillance. At any given point in time, Indian Navy or Indian Air Force will be present, deployed, in order to assist Mauritius in its surveillance of its exclusive economic zone, to deal with the security threats and to stabilize the country. So that is the special strategic defense relationship that we share with See, let me tell you what kind of investments we've already done and what are the new agreements that have been signed, what new initiatives are being proposed. Let's take a quick look. See, as of now, India has already set up a coastal surveillance radar. We have already donated military hardware to the country. We have built transport infrastructure at the Agalega Island. We've also provided financial support for Mauritius Metro Rail project. India has funded the construction of the Supreme Court building in Mauritius. Is that clear? These are some of the key initiatives that have been financed and funded from India. We supply most of the essentials, from medicines to fuel to even food items, are largely supplied from India. So India is a key provider of financial assistance, investments, and essential items. Now India and Mauritius are taking it one step ahead. During this important visit, the leaders of both countries have signed key agreements. They've agreed to step up their strategic and defense cooperation. And in the economic domain, they've agreed to trade in their national currencies in order to reduce the dependency on US dollar and foreign reserve currencies. India is trying to work out bilateral trade arrangements with many countries where we will look to trade with national currencies instead of using the foreign reserve currencies like the US dollar. So Mauritius, India have agreed to promote their bilateral trade in national currencies. India will be providing fresh investment to build a new parliament building in Mauritius. So that way we are strengthening democracy in Mauritius. Because see, don't forget, Mauritius is part of the global south. As an African country, as a developing nation, it has access to important groupings in Africa, important countries in Africa. So in many ways, Mauritius is like a gateway for us to access Africa, to push our African diplomacy as well. So India is going to finance the construction of a new parliament building, and we have announced a new loan, a 487 crore rupees credit facility for water infrastructure, for improving water supply in Mauritius. So this cements India's position, and it takes forward the influence that we have in the region, because China's presence and influence is growing significantly in this region. If you look at the trade volume between India, Mauritius and China, Mauritius, the trade between China and Mauritius is double the trade between India and Mauritius. So China has economic influence on the country. In fact, China, Mauritius have also signed a free trade agreement. China has a free trade agreement with Mauritius with a trade volume of $1.1 billion. In comparison, our trade volume is hardly around 554 million, just around half of that. So though we have cultural and strategic influence, China has economic influence. It has been trying to upset India's presence, and it has been even trying to derail India's strategic projects, such as the projects at Agalega. So given this growing presence of China, it's very important to cement our relationship. In this regard, PM Modi has announced the expansion of Sagar Doctrine. The Sagar Doctrine that was launched in 2015 has now been proposed by PM Modi to be further expanded into the Mahasagar Doctrine. So this is likely to be India's new approach in the Indian Ocean in order to counter China and also to protect India's own interest and influence. Then coming to the Chagos Island dispute. For many decades, Mauritius fought with Britain over the island dispute. This was a British overseas territory and Britain was not conceding it. It was not decolonizing these islands, which rightfully belongs to Mauritius, primarily because these islands were strategically important. I told you about Diego Garcia, right? Diego Garcia, one of the islands at Chagos, has been one of the largest naval bases of the US, and by extension, NATO countries benefit from this. Britain, a close American ally, benefits from it. So Britain never agreed to settle this issue or never gave up sovereignty, and Mauritius had to fight a diplomatic battle with Britain. It took the matter to the UN, it took the matter to the International Court of Justice as well. And each time it sought India's support, and India carefully balanced its relations with Western powers while backing the demand of Mauritius. Last year, there was a big development. Finally, Britain ceded the sovereignty, and now most of the Chagos Island archipelago has been handed over to Mauritius, except for Diego Garcia and few islands around it. So even today, there are few strategic islands as part of the Chagos group, which remains under British and American control, and Mauritius is trying to fight against it. It's trying to take back all these islands. So India has expressed support in that regard. We have extended full diplomatic support to Mauritius over the Chagos issue as well. So that is what we take away from PM Modi's visit to Mauritius. Now, let's wrap up today's session by talking about the smaller articles in today's newspaper. So we have another article which is relevant for mains that gives us an update regarding the security situation in Manipur. Recently, the Home Ministry announced free movement on all the roads and highways in order to bring back normal economic activities and to restore peace in the conflict-ridden state of Manipur. The moment Home Ministry made this announcement that free movement will be enabled across all roads and highways, which previously were blocked by armed extremist groups on both the sides, by the Meitei armed groups and by the Kuki-Zo armed groups. The moment the announcement was made, it led to fresh violence just 3-4 days ago, and few people were killed as well in the Kangpokpi region, where fresh clashes erupted between the Kuki-Zo armed militants and the Meitei armed groups. So following these clashes, the government of India, the new governor who's been appointed, Ajay Kumar Balla, the representative of the central government, they've reached out to all the sections, appealed to the Kuki-Zo armed groups, the Meitei groups as well, to tone down the violence and pave the way for removing the shutdown which has been imposed in Manipur for many, many months. Finally, the Kuki-Zo groups have agreed to lift the shutdown on national highways. But they're not going to lift the shutdown in other roads which are controlled by these insurgents, because they believe that this gives them leverage. They are demanding more autonomy, if possible a separate state. And these roads are critical for the valley region, the Imphal Valley region, where Meiteis are present. Meiteis are dependent on these roads, which right now are blocked by Kuki-Zo armed groups. So following negotiations between the Home Ministry, the Governor's Office, and these armed groups and the community leaders, Kuki-Zo groups have agreed to lift the blockade and end the shutdown with regard to national highways, thus enabling movement along the national highways. But the other roads, internal roads, are yet to be cleared of these armed insurgent groups. So situation still remains volatile, but it is a positive development that at least the national highways are going to see some free movement, and this could enable the revival of economic activities, bring back some normalcy, help in reconstruct Manipur, which has faced large-scale destruction on both the sides, both in the hill areas and in the valley areas. So hopefully this should pave the path for long-term peace by addressing the concerns of both the communities. Now coming to the prelim section, we have this spectacular image of Humayun's tomb that the Hindu carries on page number 13. The Humayun's tomb is a very important monument of the Mughal era. Humayun's tomb obviously is dedicated to Emperor Humayun of the Mughal Empire, but it was commissioned by his first wife and chief consort, Empress Bega Begum, in honor of the emperor. It was executed, designed and constructed by well-known designers, architects of Persian origin, Mirak Mirza Ghias and his son, Syed Muhammad. This monument adopts a mix of Persian Indo-Islamic architecture. It sits in the Nizamuddin region, in the Purana Killa region of Delhi, as a significant monument. And today it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. And please note down that it was the first garden tomb on the Indian subcontinent. If you ever visited Humayun's tomb, you would recollect, you would remember that the entire complex, right? It's part of a beautiful garden complex which is well designed. It was planned in such a way. It's the first garden tomb on the Indian subcontinent to be found, and it's also one of the first major structures in the Indian subcontinent to largely use red sandstone. The whole structure has this unique look and appearance primarily because it's red sandstone which has been used. So that is what makes this structure phenomenal and architectural wonder and part of our cultural heritage. So it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site today. Next, on page 14, there's an article that refers to the National Quantum Mission. What is the National Quantum Mission? It was launched in 2023 by the Government of India, approved by the Cabinet in 2023, with an allocation of 6,000 crores to promote quantum computing research in the country. The focus of this mission is to provide focus on thematic development. 4 specific themes have been identified in order to ensure India can pioneer the advances in quantum computing as well. Quantum computing is one of the critical emerging technologies today. So 4 specific themes have been identified. There is one theme focusing on quantum computing to develop the qubits and stabilize the qubits, which can handle complex calculations and conduct them at a much faster rate compared to your traditional computers. And quantum communication, which can transform the methods of communication with focus on quantum sensing and metrology and quantum materials and devices. These are the 4 themes which are identified under the National Quantum Mission. Now, the Department of Science and Technology, which is implementing this mission, has started disbursing the funds. States such as Uttar Pradesh, followed by Maharashtra, then Karnataka, and Delhi and Tamil Nadu. These are the focus states because they have the institutes which can lead the research in quantum computing and pioneer these themes. So from Karnataka, the Indian Institute of Science, IISc Bengaluru, has been selected to lead one of the themes. Then IIT Delhi, IIT Bombay, and IIT Madras, they will lead the respective themes along with IISc from Bengaluru. These are the 4 leading institutions which are going to pioneer India's quantum research. And IIT Kanpur from UP has been chosen to coordinate, work with the 4 hubs which are being set up. That is why these states are the focus. UP has received the highest funding, as IIT Kanpur will be the coordinating institution, followed by Maharashtra, Karnataka, Delhi and Tamil Nadu, because this is where the 4 hubs, the 4 thematic hubs are being established. So please make a note of these facts. The 4 thematic hubs of quantum computing, they're coming up at IISc Bengaluru in Karnataka, at IIT Delhi, Bombay and Madras in Delhi, Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu. These are the 4 hubs which are coming up for quantum research. And who will coordinate this? It would be IIT Kanpur, based out of Uttar Pradesh. So this is what you need to understand. Understood? So the government has informed the parliament recently regarding a question that was asked on the National Quantum Mission. And the government has replied stating that these quantum hubs will come up in these 4 states. IISc Bengaluru in Karnataka, IIT Bombay in Maharashtra, IIT Delhi, IIT Madras in Tamil Nadu, and IIT Kanpur in UP will coordinate this. And based on these 4 themes, India will lead research in the quantum computing domain. Next, on page 14, there is a very interesting article from history. A veteran of India's freedom movement, someone who was part of the Indian National Army led by Subhash Chandra Bose, Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, has marked and celebrated his 99th birthday. This freedom fighter is none other than Lieutenant Rangaswamy Madhavan Pillai. Lieutenant Rangaswamy Madhavan Pillai was born in Myanmar, essentially in Burma, in 1926. Later, he grew up to be a freedom fighter from the region who would enroll in the Indian Independence League that was established by Ras Bihari Bose. He would join the Indian Independence League under the leadership of Ras Bihari Bose and played a pivotal role in India's freedom movement. See, in British Burma, even in today's Myanmar, you do find a Tamil community present, a group of Tamil merchants and traders. So Lieutenant Pillai was part of that Tamil community in Burma, born in the Rangoon district, which is today Yangon, a major city in Myanmar. So he would join the Indian Independence League under Ras Bihari Bose, and later he would join the Azad Hind Fauj, or the Indian National Army, once it was established by Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose in Singapore. When Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose reached Singapore, Lieutenant Pillai would move to Singapore and join the Indian National Army, and he served as a recruiter, as a fundraiser for the Indian National Army. So he has been officially recognized as a freedom fighter by the government. He was imprisoned as well by the British authorities for his role within the Indian National Army. So one should pay tribute to his contribution. So this individual has recently marked his 99th birthday. He paid tribute in front of the memorial dedicated to Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, and that's what the article is about. But there could be a possible prelims question on Lieutenant Rangaswamy Madhavan Pillai. Then coming to a development from international relations. A conflict in Ethiopia, in the Tigray region, is likely to break out again and escalate into a possible civil war. So those of you who have been attending my sessions, I've told you that the conflict in Tigray had come to an end. See, the Tigray region in Ethiopia is located in the northern parts of Ethiopia. You can see the Tigray region here, which is home to a native group of indigenous people called the Tigray people. The Tigray people, who belong to a different ethnic tribe, they have long had issues with the federal government in Ethiopia. This has triggered conflicts in the past, and recently there was a civil war. A major war broke out where the Tigray people set up an armed group, the TPLF, the Tigray People Liberation Front, and it triggered a civil war in the country, and this led to a major conflict where the Ethiopian government targeted the TPLF. And from 2020 to 2022, the country had descended into chaos. The Ethiopian government took the support of other ethnic groups and tribes which are rivals of the Tigrays and led a brutal campaign, allegedly committing large-scale human rights violations, and eventually crushed the Tigray rebellion. And in 2023, this conflict ended with a ceasefire. The Ethiopian government negotiated with the TPLF and the Tigray leaders and brought the war to an end. And by and large, the Tigray conflict had come to a halt. But recently, there is a new faction of TPLF which has broken out. It has violated the ceasefire agreement, and it has recently captured two major towns in the Tigray region of Ethiopia. And this has triggered fears of a possible resurgence of the Tigray conflict. So that is something you need to note down. Coming to the last article for today, let's look at Hantavirus. What is Hantavirus? Hantavirus has been in news because recently a popular Hollywood actor, Oscar-winning actor Gene Hackman, passed away following old age and age-related complications, but he was found dead along with his wife and dog. Later studies have shown, because the death occurred under mysterious circumstances, studies and forensic analysis has shown that the wife largely passed away because of a possible Hantavirus infection, and following which the actor Gene Hackman, who's suffering from Alzheimer's and age-related problems, was not able to take care of himself, and eventually he passed away as well. So this incident, it generated a lot of curiosity, interest, not just in the US but around the world, mainly because the Hantavirus infection which was reported. So what is Hantavirus? Why is it a matter of concern? According to WHO, the World Health Organization, and also the CDC of US, the Center for Disease Control, Hantavirus is one of the most deadly pathogens that is present out there. It belongs to a deadly group of viruses which is mainly carried by rodents and pests. Rats, mice, for example, different types of rats and mice. You have deer mice, white-footed mice, rice rats, cotton rats, etc. These rodents are the primary vectors, the carriers of the deadly hantavirus. Once you're infected, once you come in contact with these infected rodents or the waste that they leave behind, the excreta. So that's why those who are working in farms, construction workers or homes which are infested with rats and rodents, they are at risk of contracting hantavirus. So those who clean such areas or those who are in touch with the excrement of these rats and rodents, or if they physically come in touch with the fluids of these infected rats or rodents, they will contract the deadly hantavirus, and it leads to flu-like symptoms initially. After exposure, it will take one or few weeks to incubate, and within few weeks you will start displaying very serious flu-like symptoms: high fever, fatigue, chills, and muscle ache, etc. It appears as though it's a regular flu or regular infection. But this could easily escalate to the next level where it becomes a severe life-threatening disease. It can turn into hantavirus pulmonary syndrome, HPS, which is a very severe respiratory disease. This will induce severe coughing, shortness of breath, stiffness in the chest, making breathing almost difficult and impossible, eventually leading to respiratory collapse. So this can be fatal. This can even affect renal function in a condition known as hemorrhagic fever with renal syndrome, where the kidney function gets compromised, leading to the death of the individual. So these two severe complications are possible, and the worst part is that there is no cure for hantavirus. There is no specific antiviral treatment which is available. It's only symptomatic treatment which can be provided. If it escalates into respiratory disease, oxygen therapy can be given to just relieve the symptoms, and symptom management can be done. But other than that, there is no cure available. So if the person who is infected goes to a doctor immediately and gets quick medical attention, they can survive. Through symptomatic management and the right care, you can survive the disease. But without medical care and attention, especially those who are vulnerable, old age people, children, infants, pregnant women, or those who have their immunity compromised, immunocompromised patients, they are at greater risk. In their cases, the disease will escalate into hantavirus pulmonary syndrome, into severe respiratory syndrome, or into the renal condition, the hemorrhagic fever with renal syndrome, leading to the death of the person. So that is what you need to know about hantavirus. And on this note, I bring my detailed analysis to an end. I hope you guys have liked the session, understood all the key topics, and if you did love the session, do let me know through your likes and comments. That is it. We'll see you tomorrow. Thanks for watching.